Dutch name, so I don't know how it's pronounced in Russian, but Erik will do. I will listen to that as well, so don't worry. Erik van Veenendaal or something like that, Erik. By the way, you were pronouncing in Russian things, and Russian is really, really difficult. The only thing I picked up is A, B, C, D, because that was, I understood, and smiley. The other things are like, I have no idea. What I'm going to do for the next, I think, 40 minutes, if I'm correct, and then we have a break, and then another 40 minutes, so presentation in 2 stages, talking about things that I've seen to work in my practice. I've been in testing for, well, I wouldn't say too long, but a long time. Something like 25 years, which is a long time. And there are things I've seen that, hey, these do the job. Every time again. And some other things, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't work. So I like to talk about those things. What are the things that I've seen in my career that actually have real added value? It says build the obvious, so I'm not going to talk about test automation. There's enough talks about test automation. It will be very easy for me to say, okay, building on success, let's do test automation all. So I'll talk about other things. Okay. Also, I am not talking about how to be the best in the world. I'm going to talk about how to do good enough testing, whatever that means, by the way. Okay? I think if you're in the safety critical industry, I did a lot of work in the healthcare, for instance. We have different requirements than in a, let's say, time-to-market industry. Okay, so my talk is not about being the best ever, but it's about how to be good enough and survive in everyday life, in real projects. Before I start giving you my practices or my recommendations, I would like to briefly take you how I see the testing market, or where are we as testers. And my first slide, hopefully, yeah, it works, is this one. Okay? You're all testers? Or QA personnel? You are? Yeah? Okay. Well, we don't need you anymore. No more testers. Actually, it's not a joke. I was in America, and James Whittaker was there, and he predicted that in 5 years, we would need no more testers. Actually, the presentation was already 4 years ago, but okay, so let's see. I was in Australia, where Elizabeth Henderson, who is a very much agile person, said, we don't have testers anymore, we only have team members and they're all the same, and okay. I was in a presentation recently in the Netherlands, where a professor said and predicted that because of AI coming up and other kind of things. I have heard this several times in my last 25 years. And we're still here, we still survive, so I'll come back to the statement at the end, okay? But you hear it now and then. Yet, I don't think it's getting any easier. I'm not sure you recognize all of these, but I'm sure you recognize some of these. As I said, I mean, when I did my very, very first testing job, a long time ago, it was looking back, it was very simple. It was a standalone system, and there was no internet. I mean, that's like testing, like, whoa, so easy, at least looking back. Today, so in that sense, testing is much more important than it was years ago. Looking at the systems we are now making, they are much bigger. I mean, there was a survey by Philips who showed that the amount of software in consumer products is doubling every 2 years. Think about that. So a TV set you buy today compared to one from 2 years ago has twice as much software. Have fun.
Интересно, это вызов.
В мобильном телефоне работает ли оно на планшете? Если работает на Samsung, работает ли на айфоне? Очень много вопросов, очень много устройств, очень много сетей. Как это все протестировать? Большой вопрос. Люди говорят, тестировщики больше не нужны, я не согласен с ними, потому что это мир, в котором мы живем. Все говорят о безопасности, это большая проблема сейчас. И все сложнее ее обеспечивать. Есть специалисты, которые тестируют систему на безопасность, тоже тестировщики. Иногда аутсорсинг не всегда успешен. Мы эти вещи делаем и иногда думаем, у нас же невероятное количество времени для этого. Но на самом деле это должно быть готово вчера, как говорится. Поэтому всегда мы в узкие сроки должны все делать. Каждые 2 года, как помните, говорил специалист, количество ПО увеличивается в 2 раза. Не правда ли? Было бы классно, если в то же время, каждые 2 года, разработка становилась бы в 2 раза лучше, но этого не происходит. Поэтому у нас количество ошибок в коде уменьшается постепенно, но довольно медленно. У нас все эти вызовы перед нами. Что-то в ПО все время не так. И можно об этом смеяться. Я думаю, это все очень серьезно. Вот здесь заключенный говорит, 1000 заключенных вышли на свободу слишком рано из-за ошибки в ПО.
Wow. No more testers? Even, this is probably not a big one, but if you have these new Nike sneakers who are software oriented, if you were actually putting back your laces at the same time the update was being run, it didn't do anything anymore. It's just a shoe, so I think we can laugh about this one. I don't laugh about the one which is down below. Software defect was the cause of a problem with a nuclear power plant. Software. This is the world we are living in. This is what we're here for. So it's good to think about how can we do our job in a good way. And maybe some say, Erik, I don't care what you say because we are agile. We've got it mastered. Everything is different in our world now and we're doing agile, so who cares? Well, you can see here it's going better in agile. I think agile is an improvement. And we can talk about this if you want over break for a longer period of time. However, what you also see is many who are in agile are still struggling. The line you see on this graph is from traditional projects, sequential projects. The number of defects per K-log means 1,000 lines of code. And you can see the dots from agile projects. And some, the ones below, are better than average. And some above are worse than average, which is always the case. So even in agile, you can do better than average or worse than average. It's not moving to agile takes all the problems away. I like to quote from the World Quality Report, which says, despite continuous growth in the adoption of agile, many organizations are still facing the same challenges as in previous years. Don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of agile. It has many, many, many good things. It allows you to work with customers better. Its early validation is good, but it's not like I move to agile and my quality problem goes away. That's the message I'm trying to get here. It's still we need testers. It's still we need things to do. So when you think about it, we have all these problems. What you would expect over the years, and I've been around for a long time, is that all the things I've been teaching over the years, all the things you heard at conferences, is that people say, oh, we got to do all these things because we need them. And there are many books around, textbooks on testing. There are courses. There is, maybe you've heard about ISTQB. You can become a certified tester. And it teaches you about test management. It teaches you about test automation. It teaches you about... What I'm seeing and again, I'm not trying to be negative, but this is my observation, is when I go to many organizations, and I'm not talking here about the top class organizations. There are exceptions. Those who are in the safety critical industry, probably different. But many organizations I come across, there is no test strategy. They're just trying. And test strategy, I mean that all the effort spent on testing is aligned. Unit testing is aligned with acceptance testing. We know what we're doing. I'm asked sometimes to review a test plan. And a test plan is not about writing a 30-page document. It's doing upfront thinking. What's important to test here? And I see so many test plans where I think, so what's the added value here? What's really, it's just a template which is then filled in and, okay, we've got a test plan. It's like a management satisfaction template, if you want. We teach things like, I don't know, decision tables, state transition diagram, pairwise testing. Only very few people actually use those. Hopefully you think, oh, but we are doing all these things. Good. Reviews. We talk about reviews later on again. It's one of my favorite things which you can very easily improve. But I see organizations sending out documents of 50 pages or even 100 pages and saying, please review this. It's impossible. Again, we'll come back to that one. And we know about this since, I don't know, early 80s. That's like how many years ago? And we're still not doing it. Whoa. Test automation, I think it's improved hugely over the years. But I see still many, many organizations struggling. Exploratory testing, not on the slide. Sometimes people say, they used to do error guessing, which is totally unstructured testing. And now they call it exploratory testing, say, oh, this is good. Exploratory testing is something else. So, very strangely, we have all these, if you want, assets. And we're actually not, I'm not saying all, but we're still, as an industry, as a testing industry, not doing it according to these things. And it makes you wonder. So if I'm talking about building on success, it would be very easy to say, oh, this is what a test plan looks like. This is what a test strategy looks like. This is what reviews are. These are test techniques. How to do it, but apparently we don't use them. And why are we not using them? There is something strange. Because we're still, despite the fact that we're not doing these things, we are still releasing our systems. At least most of the times, okay? Not always, but most of the times. Sometimes too late. Sometimes over budget. Sometimes with poor quality. Or sometimes all three. We're still releasing. And when we release, the organization is like, oh, this cannot happen again, and this is really, really bad. You remember that? Because at such a meeting, management says, oh, we got to do something about it. Then we have a next project, and we release. A little bit too late. Over budget. Poor quality. And management, oh, this cannot happen again. This is very, very, very important. Next project, we release. A little bit too late. Poor quality, over budget. Management, this can't happen again. This is very, very... You've been there? I've been hearing the same story 25 years. I've never been in a project where we actually release months before deadline, with quality, under budget. Never, never, ever. And management always like, oh, this cannot happen again. However, they talk about this for a week and then they forget. I think for management, it's actually okay to deliver a little bit too late, too few defects. So management, they care until a certain amount of time. But it's not like we have to be perfect. If we had to be perfect, they could actually say and go back and say, let's do all these things. So talking about testing, I think we don't need always to be the best in class. If we have to be the best in class, management should make it happen. We need to be good enough testers, whatever that means, okay? And be able to survive. So what we're looking for, actually, I think, is I call it a toolbox, a set of practices that provides you with, I call it agility, not agile, agility, lean in testing. Doing the things that really matter to be able to survive in your projects. And typically, in most organizations, that's enough. And these are the things I would like to talk about in the next, I don't know, so many minutes. Okay? That's my toolbox. When we talk about a toolbox for lean or agile in testing, you think about the Agile Manifesto. Okay. I'm not discussing about this to see what is agile, but if you look at these things, it gives you ideas how to be lean, how to have as little waste as possible, because there are values like communication. So apparently we need to look for practices that address communication. We need to be as simple as possible. Testing is about finding defects. It's not about producing documents. So try to think about that. Feedback, again, communication, trying to learn as much as possible. But also, we know we are in a world that is different than 25 years ago. A world that's changing all the time. So we need to have practices where we can respond to change. Different ideas from our stakeholders. We work with customers very closely quite often. We want to focus on getting things done. Working software, business value. So these things give us some flavor of so what are the things we should worry about if we want to build a set of, I'd say, core practices in testing. So now actually the presentation starts, okay? This was my introduction as where are we in the world of testing? And I'm not one of these people say, let's do everything which is in ISTQB or let's do everything in the textbooks. Apparently it's not needed. However, we do need testers that understand what is needed. And how can I make added value of what I'm doing in testing? The first practice, and I call it practice 0 because it's not really a testing practice, is to, first of all, understand and discuss with management what are your expectations for testing. How important is product quality actually? Because sometimes time to market, whether we like it or not, I mean, you're all testers, right? So testers have quality in their heart. That's why you're a tester. You like to produce the perfect product. But you've got to talk to management and say, okay, how important is time to market? Because in some industries, time to market, whether you like it or not, is even more interesting than product quality. And sometimes if you meet a market window, you might as well not release anymore. So it's good to understand what do you expect from testing. And the same thing is we had no more testers earlier. Is testing a profession in your company? Is there still a career path? How important, for instance, are some non-functionals? Do we need to build skills on security testing? You cannot just do security testing in a project. That's a strategic choice as an organization. How important is performance or usability? Non-functionals. So the first thing to me is, if you want to improve anything in testing, you want to adapt, talk to management, discuss. And the outcome, to some extent, is not even that interesting for me. What is interesting is to have that discussion. Create, I would say, a test policy, 1 page. This is why we exist. This is what we are trying to do. This is what management wants from us. Without that understanding, you're just doing your best. Okay. Now we're getting into real practices. Can you close the door? Is that possible? Thank you. Yeah. You can't get out now anymore. Okay. Number one. And interesting enough, I've written down some core practices, I said already, things that I saw that worked over the years. And I also look at testing principles. And quite often, these testing principles were defined by, I don't know if you're familiar with these names anymore, but Bill Hetzel, who wrote, what is it called? The Complete Guide, whatever that means, to software testing. He wrote that, beware, he wrote that book in 1983. That's previous century, okay? Some of these quotes are from Mr. Myers, who wrote The Art of Software Testing. And that's from 1976. I mean, that's so the principles are still there, but we're not doing these things. And the first one I'm very passionate about is risk-based testing. And risk-based testing means, you see already the values from Agile coming back. It's communicating with stakeholders. It's collaborating with them. It's focusing on the things that are most important and knowing which one they are. In every project, if it's different here in Letland or in Russia, please tell me. But in every project I am in, we always have too little time for testing. Yeah, it's also here, I guess, right? Or not? I see people, okay. I guess that means a yes, okay? But if there's always too little time, you need to know where to focus. If you don't know where to focus, you're just trying. So what risk-based testing is about is understanding, talking with customers, talking with developers about, so what is most important to test? And today I enter many teams, especially also Agile teams, who do a sprint of 3 weeks, and I ask them, so which user story is most important? Where are you focusing? Huh? They have no idea. So that doesn't mean that they're testing in a bad way, but they may be testing very ineffective, not focusing on the right users, because there are always more to test. So where will you focus? So to me, very important, I will give some quick examples. By the way, at the end of the day, I have no idea all the time, I think 4:15, something like that, I'm also giving a workshop on this topic. But it's important to have what I call a risk session. Notice I don't use the word assessments here. It needs to be lightweight. Remember? Sometimes you read a textbook and it's like, whoa, need to do all of this for risk assessment? For a 2-week sprint? By the time I'm done, the sprint is done. It needs to be very small, risk session. Having what I call risk-based test approach. So if something is more important, it needs to be tested differently. I'll explain in a minute. And hopefully, if at the beginning you say, these are the things I really worry about, you also track those over time, whether they are covered, yes or no. And the nice thing about risk is a language that your stakeholders typically understand. Stakeholders don't talk about defects or about psychometric complexity or about McCabe or whatever. They talk about business value. They talk about risks. So in this doing it always means we can talk, we can communicate. And trying to explain a one-day course in 2 or 3 slides, but I like challenges. As I said already, it's about setting priorities. It's first of all about identifying the risks. For me, this is me, I may be wrong, but for me, I always say, what's a risk? And there are nice definitions about there. But a risk is something that makes someone less happy. That's a risk. And sometimes that risk is so huge that the manager cannot sleep the whole night. He starts wondering about, oh no, if this happens, that's a big risk, right? And sometimes he just goes to the coffee machine, gets a cup of coffee, says, too bad. He drinks it and it's gone. That's a small risk. It sounds like, but this is the way, if you think about it this way, it's much more practical than many of the other stuff. And the same thing about, to me, if you, suppose you are doing requirements, based development or user story development, then any requirement, any user story is actually a risk. Because if that user story is not delivered, or not delivered in the right way, someone is going to be less happy. If not, then don't bother developing it in the first place. So identification would typically be make a list of the requirements that are in the sprint or user stories, and then start analyzing them. And again, I will talk about it more in detail later today, but it's about impact and likelihood. And impact is about business value. Some people say risk is impact times likelihood. I totally moved away from that, because let's consider. Suppose you say on a scale from 1 to 10, impact is 10, okay? Scale from 1 to 10, likelihood is 1. 10 times 1 is 10 times 1 is 10. Thank you very much, okay? Very well, well done. So the risk will be 10. Impact 10, likelihood 1. Let's suppose another risk, very low business value, 1. But the likelihood is very high, 10. 1 times 10 is 10. Very good, thank you. Yeah, you won a prize already. That means, no, what I'm trying to say is that actually they both are 10, but they are very, very different risks. So multiplication, if you do that, I think is wrong. I'd rather say risk is a function of impact and likelihood. And for me, when talking about these things, I like to talk about, so what determines likelihood? Things like complexity, interfacing with technology. And what determines impact? And again, we'll talk about later on if you are in the workshop. But try to somehow come up with a value for impact and likelihood. And now, what I very much, again, like, is that we end up with something I call a product risk matrix. On one hand, the impact, the business side, likelihood, technical risks, and we have 4 different squares here. These are and the nice thing about a product risk matrix, it's 10 times better than an Excel sheet. Why? Because this visualizes things. Everyone can understand what's going on. If you look at these, everyone understands that risk number 1 is more important to test than risk number 3. Right? Because number 1 is up there. It says high impact, high likelihood. And probably number 3, which is low on both, is very different. And some of our technical risks, and technical risks could be tested very much in unit testing. And some are more, let's say, impact-related risk. You could test them more, let's say, in acceptance testing, UAT testing. So depending on nature, different type of testing is needed. And if you have something in place, now everyone knows, hey, I got the test the next 3 weeks. Where should I focus my testing? I also said already in the beginning slide on this first practice, I also want what I call a differentiated, difficult word, differentiated risk-based test approach. That means depending on the risk, you would like to make clear that testing will be different. This is a difficult one for most organizations. And this comes from a client of mine where they produce machines like that, called pick-and-place machines. Happy to talk about it in the break if you want to explain what this is about. But you can see here what they defined, this is their anything which is in the right-hand corner is that we will use formal test design techniques. Decision tables, pairwise, whatever that is appropriate. We will review the software design, which is also testing and reviewing. The tester supports the development of unit tests because the tester typically has good ideas on what test cases are needed. And the tester reviews unit tests. That's the approach they will always have when a user story is on the right-hand corner. Which is a very different approach than the one left down. Because left down they say, okay, we know all these things are important, but we can't afford to do it on all the items. Let's focus and spend our effort on these things which are critical. And we still test the other parts, but it will be done by doing exploratory testing. Differentiated test approach. And suppose you work in this project and you have to do number 3, you would know exactly what your approach is. If you are number 1 or number 3 up there, that's your approach. And they defined several other approaches in between. For instance, down here, where the likelihood is not that important, but it's business. They say the business is important. We will still apply test design techniques, and we will still review the software design. There is less focus on unit testing. Whereas on top, right, where there is much more likelihood of finding defects early as possible, there is more focus on unit testing. I'm not saying this is the best example ever. I'm saying this is an example of how they said, okay, we understand the risks, and we're going to make clear to the whole team what testing will be done in the next 2-3 weeks and how it will be done. How am I doing on time? Where am I on time? I have 5 minutes. Okay, good. We can solve this one. Yeah. So, last slide for this first practice. I said already in the introduction, I said, I've seen so many test plans that I think, oh my God, why did I write these test plans? You may have heard about IEEE 829, which is a template for test documentation, which is now being replaced somewhat by ISO 29119, I think. Same thing, big templates, big products. I see you nodding like, oh really, do we need those? Yeah, I got the same impression. So what I'm proposing, learned from, again, my own experience, is we move to a different test plan. And remember, test plan is not about the document. A test plan is upfront thinking, I need to test next 3 months or 3 weeks. How will I focus my testing and what is important to test? That's what a test plan is really about. These things are the things that matter. So I'm moving to a one-page A3 test plan, if you want, whereby you have this information. This is all we actually need, sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. On the left, you see again a product risk matrix with the 4 squares, showing to the team what are the most important parts to test and which ones are least important. What makes, remember, the manager not sleep at night? That's important to understand. I think that's vital, that you need that. On the other hand, what you have, and in this case I use Moscow. We are after, And Moscow, it means again, we have the red one, red angle, so depending on priority. And for each of those, we have a test approach. And these test approaches are different depending on which square you're in. And if you want, some people also elaborate that by adding what I call exit criteria, or in Agile called DoD criteria. This is still a test plan. And I've been in projects where they use this. They put it in A3. You know what's good about, or it's A4. You know what's good about A4? With an A4, you can go to a copier. You put it on a copier. You select A3, and you do print. And you get an A3 page. And an A3 page, you can go to a wall. And there you are. That's our test plan for the next 3 weeks. Visible for all of them. And that has added value. Okay? So this is my first practice. I think we're almost on time. As I said already, I'm going to spend some time giving you 5 core practices. The first one was a free one, business needs. But my first recommendation is, I can't explain everything, but if you are starting to want to survive, make sure you know how to focus. So risk-based testing is essential. 4 more coming up. We now have a 15-minute break, if I'm correct. No or not? Oh, it's checked now by the conference organization. Yeah, I'm right. Right, good. I'm always right. Well, this case. 15-minute break. That means we start again at, let me just quickly check. We start again at 11:10, right? Okay, see you all back at 11:10. Thank you very much. 11:25. Oh, see, I'm not always right. I'm not always right. See, I'm wrong. We start, it's now 11:10, and we start again at 11:25. See you all back at 11:25. Thank you.